The Onyx Room wasn't just a restaurant, it was a statement. Marble floors gleamed under chandeliers that dripped crystal light. Tables were draped in heavy linen, the color of cream, and the low hum of conversation was punctuated by the clink of expensive silverware against fine china. For Lena Washington, it was a gilded cage. She moved through it with a practiced grace, her smile polite, her service impeccable. Each shift was a performance, one that paid the bills but chipped away at a part of her she kept fiercely guarded. Lena was a waitress, a black woman in a predominantly white, wealthy space, and she understood the unspoken rules. She was there to be efficient, unobtrusive, almost invisible until needed. The manager, Mr. Davies, a man whose spine seemed to have been replaced by a flexible rod that bent readily towards money, reinforced this daily. "The customer, Lena," he'd say, his voice oozing false sincerity, "is always right, especially when their bill can cover your wages for a week." Tonight, the air in the Onyx Room felt particularly heavy. Perhaps it was the oppressive humidity of the city summer seeping in, or perhaps it was the presence of Mr. Alistair Sterling. Sterling was a man whose wealth was as vast as his arrogance. He was a regular, and his visits were dreaded by the staff. He was loud, demanding, and seemed to take a perverse pleasure in pointing out the smallest imagined flaw. Lena was clearing a table adjacent to Sterling's party of 6. He was holding court, his voice booming, recounting some self-congratulatory anecdote. As she worked, a melody drifted into her mind, a fragment of a Chopin nocturne, complex and bittersweet. Without thinking, a soft, almost inaudible hum escaped her lips as she stacked the plates. Sterling's head snapped around. What was that? He barked, his eyes cold and gray, fixing on her. Lena froze. "Excuse me, sir. Fat singing.
Or humming.
Whatever it was. Were you making that noise?" His companions snickered, sensing sport. Lena's cheeks warmed. I apologize, sir. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize?" Sterling drawled, a smirk playing on his lips. He glanced at the gleaming grand piano that stood in the corner of the room, mostly a decorative piece, occasionally used by a hired musician on weekend nights. "Perhaps you fancy yourself a performer. Is that it, girl?" Mr. Davies, ever alert to the whims of his high-paying clientele, scurried over. "Is there a problem, Mr. Sterling?" "No problem, Davies," Sterling said, his eyes still locked on Lena. "Just discovered we have a hidden talent in our midst. Our waitress here, she's a songbird." He let out a short, unpleasant laugh. "Tell you what," he continued, his voice carrying across the nearby tables, "why don't you play something for us on that piano? Entertain us." Lena's heart plummeted. The request was not a request, it was a command, wrapped in layers of mockery. He wanted to humiliate her, to make her an evening's amusement. She could feel the eyes of other diners turning towards them, a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. "Sir, I couldn't," Lena stammered, her gaze dropping to the polished floor. "I'm working." "Nonsense." Sterling waved a dismissive hand. "Davies here will give you a little break, won't you, Davies?" Mr. Davies looked from Sterling's expectant face to Lena's distressed one. His choice was instantaneous. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. An excellent idea, a little live music." He turned to Lena, his smile tight, his eyes hard. "Lena, Mr. Sterling has made a request. Don't be difficult." The pressure was immense. To refuse would mean insubordination, likely her job. To comply felt like bearing her soul for ridicule. The piano, once a source of solace and joy in a life that had taken too many difficult turns, now felt like an instrument of torture. Her dream of being a concert pianist, a dream she'd had to abandon years ago when family tragedy struck and responsibilities mounted, felt like a cruel ghost in that moment. She had poured her grief, her hopes, her everything into those keys in the quiet of her small apartment, on a battered upright her grandmother had left her. That music was sacred to her. "Go on," Sterling urged, his voice laced with impatient condescension. "Don't be shy. We're all waiting to see this remarkable talent." Trapped, Lena slowly nodded. "All right, sir." Her voice was barely a whisper. The gilded cage had just sprung a new, more malicious kind of trap. The walk to the grand piano felt like a mile across a hostile desert. Each step was heavy, the silence in the onyx room amplifying the frantic thumping of Lena's heart. Mr. Sterling leaned back in his chair, a smug, anticipatory grin plastered on his face, his guests mirroring his amusement. Mr. Davies hovered nearby, his expression a mixture of anxiety and forced pleasantry. Lena could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some pitying, some, like Sterling's, openly derisive. She reached the piano, its polished ebony surface reflecting the glittering chandeliers like a dark, still lake. For a moment, she hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted the fallboard. The keys, pristine and white, seemed to mock her. They were a world away from the worn, yellowed ivories of her grandmother's piano. This instrument was designed for masters, for confident, celebrated hands, not for a waitress coerced into a spectacle. Taking a deep breath, Lena tried to shut out the expectant faces, the whispers, the stifling opulence of the room. She closed her eyes for a second, searching for that quiet place within herself where the music lived, a sanctuary untouched by the evening's humiliation. She thought of her grandmother's encouraging smile, the worn sheet music, the hours of solace she'd found in the intricate dance of notes. Then she began to play. It wasn't a simple tune, no tentative, fumbling melody that Sterling and his cronies clearly expected. Instead, the opening chords of Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, up, post, filled the room, a piece fraught with sorrow, yearning, and a defiant sort of beauty. Her touch was initially delicate, almost hesitant, but as she settled into the familiar landscape of the music, a transformation occurred. Her fingers, usually so adept at balancing trays and pouring wine, flew across the keys with a precision and passion that was breathtaking. The melody soared, notes cascading like liquid moonlight, each phrase shaped with an emotional intelligence that spoke of a deep, intimate connection to the music. The complexity of the piece, its rapid runs and intricate harmonies, seemed to unfold effortlessly under her command. She wasn't just playing notes, she was telling a story, her story, full of an unspoken grief, but also an unyielding strength. A hush fell over the onyx room, deeper and more profound than before. Sterling's smirk faltered, then slowly dissolved into a slack, jawed gape. The wine glass halfway to his lips stopped, forgotten. His companions stared, their earlier amusement replaced by stunned disbelief. Other diners, initially just curious onlookers, were now utterly captivated. Forks paused mid-air, conversations died, and all attention was riveted on the slender figure at the piano, pouring her soul into the music. Mr. Davies stood frozen, his jaw practically on the floor. This was not the clumsy, embarrassing display he had anticipated, nor the simple compliance he had demanded. This was genius. Among the diners, seated at a discreet table near the back, was Ms. Vivian Moreau, a woman of discerning taste and immense influence in the classical music world. Ms. Moreau was a critic whose reviews could make or break careers, a philanthropist who had launched countless young talents. She had come to the Onyx room for a quiet dinner, expecting nothing more than overpriced food and stuffy ambience. Now she leaned forward, her expression intent, a rare spark of genuine excitement in her eyes. She recognized not just technical skill, but a raw, profound artistry that was all too rare. Lena, lost in the music, was only vaguely aware of the shift in the room's atmosphere. She played on, the nocturne giving way to a fiery, impassioned section of a Liszt etude showcasing a dazzling technical virtuosity that seemed impossible for someone who, moments ago, was just a waitress. The music swelled, filled the room, and then, with a final lingering chord that shimmered in the air, it was over. For a beat, absolute silence reigned. Then someone began to clap, another joined in, and another, until the room erupted in a wave of spontaneous, enthusiastic applause. It wasn't the polite, restrained clapping the Onyx room was used to. It was genuine, heartfelt, and loud. Lena slowly opened her eyes, her chest heaving slightly. She looked out at the sea of faces, no longer mocking or indifferent, but alight with admiration and surprise. Her gaze drifted to Mr. Sterling. He was pale, his mouth slightly agape, speechless. The triumphant sneer was gone, replaced by a look of utter, bewildered shock. He had intended to humiliate her, but she had, with nothing but her talent, turned the tables completely. Ms. Vivian Moreau, a subtle smile playing on her lips, discreetly signaled to a nearby waiter. When he approached, she murmured, "The young lady at the piano, could you please find out her name for me?" The applause eventually subsided, leaving an awkward, charged energy in its wake. Lena rose from the piano bench, her legs feeling a little unsteady. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod towards the diners, her composure regained, though a flush of color still warmed her cheeks. She avoided looking directly at Mr. Sterling, whose face was now a tight mask of controlled fury and deep-seated embarrassment. Mr. Davies, recovering from his initial shock, rushed forward, his expression a confused jumble.
"Lena? That was quite something,"
he stammered, unsure whether to scold her for upstaging a prime customer or praise her for the unexpected entertainment. He settled for a weak, bewildered smile. Sterling, having found his voice, scoffed, though it lacked its earlier conviction. Well, a party trick. Quite the little performer, aren't we? He tried to regain control of the situation, to diminish what had just happened. Don't let it go to your head, girl. You're still here to pour the wine. But his words fell flat. The other diners who had witnessed the exchange and the astonishing performance now looked at him with expressions ranging from disapproval to contempt. Before Lena could retreat to the relative anonymity of her duties, a distinguished woman with an air of quiet authority approached her. It was Ms. Vivian Moreau. "That was an extraordinary performance, young lady," Ms. Moreau said, her voice warm and her eyes kind. "Truly breathtaking. You have a remarkable gift." Lena felt a genuine warmth spread through her, a stark contrast to the cold humiliation she'd felt earlier. "Thank you, ma'am," she murmured, a shy smile touching her lips. Ms. Moreau handed Lena a simple, elegant business card. "Vivian Moreau. Please, call my office. I would be very interested in speaking with you further." Lena looked at the card. Vivian Moreau, arts philanthropist and consultant. A thrill of cautious hope something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, fluttered in her chest. Could this be real? I will. Thank you, Lena said, clutching the card as if it were a lifeline. As Ms. Moreau departed, leaving a subtle but powerful impression on the room, Lena tried to return to her work. But the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Whispers followed her, no longer speculative or pitying, but filled with awe and curiosity. Some patrons offered her congratulatory smiles. Mr. Sterling, however, was stewing. His evening, meant to be a display of his own importance, had been hijacked. He had been made to look like a fool, his attempt at mockery backfiring spectacularly. What Mr. Sterling didn't realize was that Ms. Moreau, even before leaving, had made a mental note to inquire further into his reputation and the general management style of the Onyx Room. Her philanthropic endeavors often involved supporting ethical businesses alongside talented individuals. Later that evening, after the last diners had left and the staff were cleaning up, Mr. Davies cornered Lena in the service corridor. His earlier confusion had hardened into a nervous resentment. "Look, Washington," he began, his tone sharp, "don't let that little display go to your head. You got lucky tonight. That woman, Ms. Moreau, she probably won't even remember you tomorrow." Lena met his gaze evenly. "She asked me to call her." Davies scoffed. "People like her say things. It doesn't mean anything. Your job here is to be a waitress, understand? Not a concert pianist." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. Mr. Sterling was displeased. Very displeased. He said you were insubordinate, that you deliberately tried to show him up. "That's not true," Lena stated calmly. "He forced me to play." "It doesn't matter what's true," Davies snapped. "It matters what Mr. Sterling thinks. He's a valuable customer. You, on the other hand," he let the implication hang in the air. "From now on, I want you to keep a low profile. No more theatrics. Stick to your duties. And maybe try to stay out of Mr. Sterling's sight if he comes in again." He was already planning to adjust the schedule, to assign her to the less desirable, early week shifts or tasks in the back, away from the main dining floor. He couldn't risk another incident that might upset his prized clientele. Lena walked home that night, the city lights blurring around her. Ms. Moreau's card was tucked safely in her pocket, a small rectangle of hope against the heavy weight of Davies's warning and Sterling's lingering malice. The gilded cage had shown its bars again, attempting to confine her talent, to remind her of her place. But for the first time in a long while, Lena felt a flicker of defiance. She had a choice to make. The following days at the Onyx Room were palpably tense for Lena. Mr. Davies, true to his word, had subtly altered her responsibilities. She found herself more often in the kitchen polishing cutlery, or relegated to the less prominent sections of the restaurant, far from the grand piano and the gaze of patrons like Mr. Sterling. He treated her with a cool, formal distance, a constant reminder of his disapproval and her precarious position. Yet, every time her hand brushed against Ms. Moreau's card in her pocket, a spark of resolve ignited within her. After a week of deliberation, battling her own doubts and the ingrained fear of disappointment, Lena finally made the call. Ms. Moreau's assistant answered, and to Lena's surprise, she was put through almost immediately. "Lena, my dear, I'm so glad you called." Ms. Moreau's voice was as warm and encouraging as it had been in person. "I haven't stopped thinking about your performance." The conversation was transformative. Ms. Moreau didn't just offer praise. She offered a tangible opportunity. She was organizing her annual Starlight Serenade, a prestigious charity gala that raised funds for young, underprivileged musicians. It was attended by the city's cultural elite, patrons of the arts, critics, and media. "There's a slot," Ms. Morrow said. "A brief one, perhaps 10 minutes, but it's a discerning audience. I believe they would be enchanted by your talent. Would you consider it?" Lena's breath caught in her throat. It was more than she could have dared to hope for. "Yes," she managed, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, I would be honored." The weeks leading up to the gala were a whirlwind. Lena's small apartment, usually a quiet refuge, now buzzed with focused energy. Her grandmother's old upright piano, which had patiently absorbed her joys and sorrows for years, became her dedicated partner. Every spare moment before her shifts at the Onyx Room, late into the night after returning exhausted, was spent practicing. She meticulously chose her piece, a fiery and soulful rhapsody by Brahms, one that allowed for both technical brilliance and profound emotional expression. News, however, travels fast in the circles frequented by men like Alistair Sterling. Whether it was a careless remark from a gala committee member, or perhaps even Mr. Davies, seeking to curry favor by passing on gossip, Sterling learned of Lena Washington's upcoming performance at the Starlight Serenade. His ego, still smarting from the public deflation at the Onyx Room, couldn't bear the thought of her receiving further acclaim. He became determined to ensure her failure, or at least to discredit her beforehand. He began subtly poisoning Wells' casual remarks at his club about the waitress with delusions of grandeur, questions about her dubious background, whispered to influential ears. He even called Mr. Davies, applying pressure. "Heard your little pianist is aiming high, Davies." Sterling sneered over the phone. "Wouldn't want the Onyx Room to be associated with any embarrassing spectacles, would we? Perhaps it's time you reconsidered her employment entirely. Loyalty should be to your patrons, not your staff's whims." Mr. Davies, caught between Sterling's vindictiveness and the distant, unlikely possibility of Lena's success, grew increasingly agitated. He called Lena into his office. "I've heard about this gala thing," he said, his face tight with displeasure. "You need to understand, Lena, if this goes badly, if you embarrass yourself, it reflects on us. On me." He didn't outright threaten her job, but the implication was clear. What Mr. Sterling and Mr. Davies didn't realize was that Ms. Vivian Morrow was not a woman to be trifled with, nor was she naive. She had anticipated Sterling's pettiness. Behind the scenes, a different plan was unfolding. She'd told Lena during one of their brief check, in calls, her voice calm but firm. While Lena practiced, Ms. Morrow had been conducting her own quiet investigation. Her inquiries into Sterling revealed a pattern of bullying behavior and questionable ethics in his business dealings. She also delved into the Onyx Room, uncovering whispers among former staff about Mr. Davies's complicity in fostering a toxic work environment, where wealthy patrons' bad behavior was not just tolerated but catered to, often at the expense of the staff's dignity, and sometimes even their rightful earnings. Some spoke of unfair deductions from tips to cover breakages, blamed on staff after incidents caused by unruly guests. Ms. Moreau shared some of her general findings with Lena, not to distract her but to empower her. "Courage, my dear," she had said. "Talent like yours deserves to be heard, and bullies like Sterling only have power if we allow them to." Encouraged by Ms. Moreau's unwavering support and armed with the truth of her own worth, Lena found a new strength. She even spoke to a couple of her more trusted colleagues at the Onyx Room, who, tired of the prevailing injustices, quietly confirmed some of Davies's questionable practices. They couldn't offer much public support, fearing for their jobs, but their silent solidarity was a balm to Lena's spirit. The crescendo was building, not just in her music, but in the fight for her future. The night of the Starlight Serenade arrived, cloaked in the nervous excitement that always precedes a significant event. The ballroom glittered, a sea of elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos. Lena, standing backstage, felt a tremor of anxiety course through her. The opulent surroundings, the murmur of the expectant crowd, the weight of the opportunity, it was almost overwhelming. She clutched a small, smooth stone in her palm, a keepsake from her grandmother. Grounding herself, she peeked through a slit in the curtain. The room was packed, and there, seated at a prominent table, was Mr. Alastair Sterling, his expression a mixture of smug anticipation and barely concealed disdain. He was clearly expecting, perhaps even hoping for, her to falter. Not far from him, looking distinctly uncomfortable, was Mr. Davies, likely there, at Sterling's insistence, a reluctant witness to what he probably presumed would be Lena's public downfall. Then, Miss Vivian Moreau stepped onto the stage to introduce the next performer. Her voice, calm and authoritative, filled the ballroom. "Tonight, we have a truly special treat," she began. "A young woman of extraordinary talent, whose music speaks with a rare honesty and passion. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Ms. Lena Washington." Taking a deep breath, Lena walked onto the stage. A polite ripple of applause greeted her. She sat at the magnificent concert grand, its keys gleaming under the spotlights. For a moment, she closed her eyes, shutting out Sterling's sneer, Davies's anxious frown, and the hundreds of expectant faces. She found that quiet sanctuary within, the place where only the music mattered. Then, her fingers found the keys, and the opening chords of Brahms' Rhapsody in G minor filled the hall, bold, dramatic, and utterly captivating. What followed was not just a performance, it was a declaration. Lena poured every ounce of her being into the music, her struggles, her hopes, her resilience, her fiery spirit. The Rhapsody unfolded with breathtaking power and nuance, from its turbulent, passionate outbursts to its moments of tender lyricism. Her technical command was flawless, but it was the profound emotional depth she conveyed that held the audience spellbound. She wasn't just playing notes, she was bearing her soul, and it was magnificent. When the final, resounding chord faded, a split second of stunned silence hung in the air before the ballroom erupted. It wasn't polite applause this time. It was a roar, a standing ovation that washed over Lena in a wave of genuine admiration. Tears welled in her eyes as she stood, bowing gracefully, a radiant smile finally breaking through her composure. She caught Sterling's eye. His face was ashen, his jaw clenched. He remained seated, a solitary island of disbelief in a sea of standing admirers. Mr. Davies looked utterly bewildered, his earlier anxieties now replaced by a dawning, uncomfortable realization of his misjudgment. Ms. Moreau returned to the stage beaming and took Lena's hand. "Remarkable," she said, her voice carrying clearly. Then, turning to the audience, she continued, "Lena's journey to this stage is a testament to the fact that extraordinary talent can be found in the most unexpected of places, sometimes hidden in plain sight, overlooked, or even actively discouraged by prejudice or indifference. Her gaze flickered meaningfully towards Sterling's table. "It reminds us," Ms. Moreau went on, her tone becoming more pointed, "of our collective responsibility to nurture such gifts and to challenge the environments that seek to stifle them." She then made her stunning announcement. "To that end, tonight, I am thrilled to announce the establishment of the Starlight Melody Scholarship, a new fund dedicated to supporting gifted young musicians from underprivileged backgrounds, ensuring that financial hardship or societal barriers do not silence their music." More applause followed. "Furthermore," she added, her voice firm, "my foundation will also be looking closely at institutions and businesses within our community to ensure they foster environments of respect and fairness for all individuals, particularly those in service roles whose dignity is too often compromised." The implication was crystal clear. Mr. Sterling felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The murmurs around his table were no longer admiring. Eyes turned towards him, now filled with judgment. His carefully constructed facade of respectability was crumbling. The fallout for him was swift. His public shaming at such a prestigious event sent ripples through his social and business circles. Deals suddenly stalled. Invitations dried up. His attempt to mock Lena had led to his own disgrace. For Mr. Davies, the consequences were equally dire. Ms. Moreau's pointed remarks about institutions and environments of respect did not go unnoticed by the owners of the Onyx Room, who were also present, coupled with subsequent discreet inquiries spurred by Moreau's foundation and the now emboldened whispers of other staff. Davies soon faced a formal investigation into his management practices. He was eventually demoted, the restaurant scrambling to repair its tarnished reputation. Lena, however, was on a different trajectory. The Starlight Serenade was just the beginning. Offers for scholarships, further performances, and mentorship poured in. Ms. Moreau became a true benefactor, guiding her through the often treacherous waters of the music world. Lena finally had the chance to dedicate her life to her passion, her talent now a beacon instead of a secret. She never forgot the Onyx Room or the lessons learned in that gilded cage. Her success became not just a personal triumph, but an inspiration, a quiet testament to the power of talent, dignity, and the courage to play your own song, no matter who tries to silence it. And so, Lena Washington's journey from an overlooked waitress facing down scorn to a celebrated pianist gracing concert stages serves as a powerful reminder that true talent knows no barriers and that integrity ultimately prevails against prejudice. If this story of resilience and the fight for justice stirred something in you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring narratives about people who turned adversity into triumph. What was the most impactful moment for you?